Have you ever asked yourself, why am I exhausted even when I'm doing everything right? Why does working harder only make me feel emptier? Or am I chasing a life that was never really mine to begin with? Mia wasn't lazy. She woke up at 6 a.m. every day. She was at the top of her class in business school, landed a competitive internship, and attended every networking event she could find. On the surface, she was exactly who people pointed to when they said, "That's what success looks like." And yet, one Tuesday afternoon, she sat alone in her car during lunch break and cried. Nothing dramatic had happened. No fight, no failure, no crisis. Just this slow, aching realization that no matter how hard she pushed herself, she didn't know why anymore. Why she was running. Why she was trying so hard. Why she felt so far from herself. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. And maybe what you need isn't more motivation, but a moment of truth. As Simon Sinek, author of Start With Why, once said, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. That was the beginning of Mia's real journey, not toward success, but toward meaning. Mia had always been told that hard work would eventually lead to happiness. That success was a straight line made of long nights, perfect resumes, and doing the right things in the right order. So she followed the formula. She made the dean's list, landed a summer internship at a fast-growing fintech company, said yes to every opportunity, built a LinkedIn profile that read like a future CEO. But behind closed doors, Mia wasn't sleeping well. She started waking up with a heaviness in her chest. She'd scroll job boards at 1 a.m., not because she needed another opportunity, but because she was desperate to feel something different. When she heard Simon Sinek's words in a podcast one night, they didn't just resonate, they hit her like a truth she'd been trying to avoid. Working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. It made her pause. What if the problem wasn't her effort, but her direction? What if she wasn't tired because she was weak, but because she was constantly swimming against her own current? That's the thing about burnout. It's not always about doing too much. Sometimes it's about doing everything except the things that matter to you. At first, Mia didn't know what she cared about. She had been so conditioned to be driven, ambitious, competitive, she never had space to ask, what actually lights me up? She decided to slow down. She cut one extracurricular, declined a project at work, took long walks without headphones, just letting her mind wander. She started journaling not for productivity, but remember what her voice sounded like without pressure. And slowly, something emerged. She remembered how much she loved writing as a child, that she used to create short stories in 5th grade and read them to her younger brother, that she once dreamed of working in publishing before someone told her, "That's not a real career." It was a quiet truth, but it felt real and scary, because chasing that truth would mean leaving the path that had earned her praise, approval, and certainty. It would mean starting over without applause. This is the dilemma so many young adults face. We're taught that fulfillment will come after success, that passion is a luxury, something you're allowed to think about only after you've proven yourself. But what if the opposite is true? What if burnout isn't a sign of failure, but a signal from your body that you're living out of alignment? What if the deepest exhaustion doesn't come from working hard, but from working hard for the wrong thing? For Mia, this wasn't a one-time epiphany. It was a slow shedding, She didn't drop out of school or burn bridges. Instead, she started asking better questions. She reached out to alumni who had taken unconventional paths. She explored creative writing workshops on weekends without telling anyone. And something strange happened. Even though she was technically doing more, she started feeling lighter. The fatigue didn't disappear, but now it had a purpose. The long hours felt like an investment, not a drain. She wasn't just surviving her day, she was curious about it. That's the power of working towards something you care about. It doesn't mean life gets easier. It just means that the struggle becomes worth it. But of course, even discovering your passion doesn't solve everything. Because knowing what you want doesn't mean you're ready to face yourself. That's where the real work begins, not the work of resumes and achievements, but the internal work. The kind that forces you to ask, why am I afraid of disappointing others? Why do I attach my worth to my performance? Why is it easier to chase expectations than to sit with uncertainty? Those questions don't have quick answers. But thousands of years ago, one man offered a clue. He didn't write productivity books or give TED Talks. He rode a water buffalo and wrote about the universe flowing like a river. He believed that the greatest strength wasn't found in control, but in surrender. His name was Lao Tzu, and he once said something that is echoed across centuries. He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is mighty. In Mia's story, discovering her passion was the easy part. The hard part came next. Realizing what you love is a kind of relief. But staying true to that without running back to comfort, approval, or the familiar is a different kind of battle altogether. For Mia, the days after admitting she no longer resonated with the business path were not dramatic. No one yelled at her. No one disowned her. In fact, the outside world barely reacted at all. And somehow, that made it worse. There were no angry voices to fight against, only a haunting silence. No one was questioning her except herself. For the first time, Mia wasn't right. She didn't have a polished answer when someone asked, "So what's next?" She no longer fit neatly into anyone's expectations, including her own. And that's when the real battle began. Not with the world, with herself. Thousands of years ago, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, founder of Taoism, said something quietly profound. He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is mighty. In Western culture, strength is often measured by control, time management, discipline, outperforming the competition. But Lao Tzu suggested something different. He pointed us inward to the quiet, often overlooked truth that the hardest opponent you will ever face is your own mind. Mia started to see the beliefs she had carried for years, that she only had worth if she excelled, that being useful was the same as being lovable, that if she couldn't name her 5-year plan, she was falling behind. No one directly told her these things, but they had shaped every decision she made, every dream she let go of, every moment she compared herself to someone else's timeline. To conquer herself, as Lao Tzu described, didn't mean becoming someone new. It meant having the courage to sit with the truths she had been avoiding. It meant asking, again and again, is this really my choice? Or am I just scared to disappoint someone? Would I still want this if no one clapped for me? Am I building a life or just maintaining an image? At first, Mia thought she needed to do more to find clarity. New goals, new systems, new checklists. But the more she tried to fix her life with structure, the more tangled it felt. So she stopped. She went for long walks with no agenda, turned off podcasts, closed the tabs. She sat in the park with a blank notebook and for the first time in months wrote something real. I'm afraid of being myself. That single sentence broke something open. Lao Tzu believed the universe flows like a river, natural, unforced. He taught that we don't have to dominate life. We can move with it. But to do that, we must first know where we stand. In Taoism, strength isn't about aggression. It's about alignment. Mia didn't need to abandon her life or prove anything. She just needed to stop resisting her own truth. So she did small things. She allowed herself to not be impressive for a while. She let go of people who only saw her as a future title. She learned to sit in discomfort without rushing to fix it. And every time she chose honesty over perfection, something shifted. She wasn't winning accolades, but she was reclaiming her peace. That's what Lao Tzu meant. It's not about overcoming the world. It's about not abandoning yourself in order to be accepted by it. And yet, even when you've come home to yourself, the hardest part remains. Can you stay true to who you are when the world constantly pressures you to become someone else? That tension isn't new. Over a century ago, in a rapidly industrializing America, another thinker wrote something equally radical, especially for his time. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment, by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Not wealth, not fame, not perfection, but being yourself and staying that way. And for Mia, it was this truth that helped her through the loneliest parts of the journey. Mia had begun to reconnect with who she was. Not the curated version, not the future leader persona, just her. Unfiltered, uncertain, whole. But the moment she started showing up as that version, the real one, the world began to push back. It was subtle at first. A friend she hadn't spoken to in months messaged, "Wait, I thought you were going into finance? What's with all the writing stuff?" Her dad, supportive but cautious, asked during dinner, "So, do you have a plan B?" Even her LinkedIn feed became a source of quiet shame filled with polished updates from peers landing six-figure jobs, launching startups, getting featured in Forbes 30 Under 30. Mia had once dreamed of being on that list. Now, she just wanted to get through the day without doubting every choice she'd made. That's the irony of self-discovery. The moment you begin to be yourself is often when you feel most alone. It was around this time that Mia stumbled on a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, a 19th century American philosopher and essayist who championed the power of individualism long before it was trendy. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Not a degree. Not a title, not a six-figure income, but this: to stand rooted in who you are when everything around you whispers that you're not enough. Emerson wasn't writing this for people who wanted to escape society. He wrote for people living inside it, people like Mia. He understood that the modern world was designed to reward imitation. Dress a certain way. Speak a certain way. Want the things everyone else seems to want. But he also believed that living authentically wasn't just noble, it was necessary. Because without it, life becomes a performance. And performances, no matter how convincing, are exhausting to sustain. Mia started noticing just how many of her past choices had been shaped by invisible hands. The major she picked, the jobs she applied for, the friends she surrounded herself with. It wasn't that those things were bad, but they weren't hers, not really. So now, as she tried to write, explore, and experiment, she carried with her this uneasy tension. Will I still belong if I stop being who they expect me to be? And yet, Despite the discomfort, something within her had changed. She no longer craved applause. She craved alignment. It's easy to confuse confidence with loudness. But the kind of confidence Mia was learning, the quiet kind, was deeper. It didn't need to broadcast itself. It didn't need to prove or defend. It simply asked, "Is this true to me?" If the answer was yes, that was enough. Still, this path wasn't linear. There were days Mia questioned everything again. Days she wanted to go back to what was familiar. Days she doubted whether being herself was really worth the cost. That's the thing no one tells you. Authenticity isn't a destination. It's a choice, one you make over and over, especially when it's inconvenient. And sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is not leave, is not fight, but simply remain. Remain in your truth. Remain in your pace. Remain in your values, even when no one else claps for them. One evening, Mia was sitting in a local cafe, working on a short story she had been too afraid to share for months. She had no audience, no expectations, just herself and the page. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't trying to write something brilliant. She was just writing something honest. And that was enough. Emerson's words weren't a shield against self-doubt, but they were a compass, one that pointed inward, and reminded Mia that living a meaningful life wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about remembering who you are and staying there, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's quiet, even when it's just you. Still, even now, Mia doesn't claim to have figured it all out. She still has bad days. She still compares herself, still second guesses. But there's one thing she knows with clarity now. She's no longer lost. Because even when you have no map, if you're walking toward your own truth, you're not off course. You're home. And maybe that's the lesson buried underneath all the noise. That we don't need to do more, or become someone else, or win the game. Maybe we just need to return to what was always there, waiting quietly underneath all the pretending. So what happens next? What does life look like for someone like Mia, who chooses truth over trophies? Let's find out in the final part of this journey. Mia didn't end up on a magazine cover. She didn't build a personal brand or launch a wildly successful business. Not yet, anyway. But today, she wakes up without that heavy feeling in her chest. She writes not because she has to prove anything, but because it reminds her who she is. She still gets afraid. She still compares herself sometimes. But now, she knows how to pause and return. Back to her voice, back to her pace, back to her truth. And maybe that's the quiet revolution we all need. Not to chase more, not to win louder, but to live more honestly in a world that never stops asking us to perform. So here's the truth we leave you with. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You might just be out of alignment with what you care about, with what you believe, with who you really are. And maybe the first step isn't fixing anything. It's just finally listening. If this story spoke to something inside you, share your thoughts in the comments below. We're not here to tell you what to do, but we are here to remind you, you're not alone. And if you're ready for more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us. Because next time, we're going even deeper. Thank you for taking the time to listen. wishing you strength and steadiness wherever your path may lead.